Mr. Schiff, your 1 minute opening statement, please.
Rita, thank you. I want to thank you and Mary and the League of Women Voters for hosting the forum tonight. I want to thank everyone for coming this evening. It's impressive that we have so many people during the World Series come out for a political debate. But at a time when there are bombs being sent in the mail to people around the country, it's all the more important that we have a civil discourse like the League hosts every election cycle. So again, thank you to the League. In our district, and indeed around the country, people are working, but all too many, millions in fact, are not earning enough to get by, not earning enough to put bread on the table, to provide for their family's health or education. These are some of the seminal challenges facing my constituents. I want to continue to work on raising incomes and providing health care. I want to defend the Affordable Care Act and people's access to care that have pre-existing conditions. And I want to make sure that the Congress is once again a check on the executive.
Thank you. Mr. Nalbandian, your 1 minute statement, opening statement, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Honorable Congressman Schiff, Honorable Congressman Sherman, Mark Reed, candidate, honorable candidate. My name is Johnny Nalbandian, and I'm not a politician, a career politician. I'm not a lawyer, nor am I a philosopher. I spent most of my life in the food industry. Over the years, what has happened, my district has deteriorated, and I love our district. It has gone down to where we have 75% homelessness. And with that, I'm sure we'll be talking about that a little later. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for having this historic event, and I look forward to this evening.
Thank you.
And I thank you so much.
Mr. Sherman, your opening statement, please.
Hello, I'm Brad Sherman, and I've had the honor for many years to represent the South and the West San Fernando Valley in the United States Congress, including some 30,000 residents here in Burbank. Today is my birthday, and I can think of no better birthday present than what the League has provided, a chance for us to discuss the issues facing our country. I think it's important to have forums like this. I have been I've been invited to these forums for the last 12 years and have always been here, except for once I was disinvited because my opponent chose not to attend. And I'm so pleased that my opponent is attending, and I look forward to perhaps being back here in 2020 to discuss my record should I be successful in this re-election campaign. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Reed, your opening statement, please.
Yes, I want to thank the League of Women's Voters for giving me the opportunity to once again discuss the issues facing the district. One of the biggest issues and the reasons why I'm running is because of the completing qualifications of my opponent. In his office, there's been several rape and sexual harassment issues that have taken place. Based on the New York Daily News, rape in Sherman's office district, UCLA, college Democrats advise women not to intern in Sherman's office, the Sacramento Bee,
I'm sorry.
Sherman's toxic office.
I believe that violates our rule on
This is not a personal attack. This is on his ability of running an office, which is the district office. This is not personal. This goes into his ability of running his office, which is our representative in Washington, D.C. If these things are taking place under his control of his office, it's a reflection of his ability to run the office. That's it. And based on the atmosphere.
All right. You may continue the statement. You have 25 seconds.
Okay. Sherman's concern is political liability. The LA Times, CBS News. Sherman blames DeBobany's political opponents for not alleging DeBobany's misconduct. Sherman's office deletes questions on sexual harassment scandal from town hall video, Sacramento Bee. He's been offered 6 debates with the American Legion halls, synagogues, churches, and also battered women's, and he's denied them all.
Thank you. We'll now
Can I have 1 minute to respond to that?
We'll have to save that for the closing statement, I'm sorry. We'll now begin.
My integrity has been attacked. I look forward to responding
I
appropriately.
understand. We'll now begin the questions. The Trump administration has proposed to reduce the cap on the number of refugee admissions to the U.S. to 30,000 from the previous ceiling of 110,000 in 2017, to limit family unification, to spouses and minor children, and to eliminate birthright citizenship. Do you support or oppose these and other proposals to reduce legal immigration? Why or why not? Mr. Schiff, your 3-minute response, please.
Thank you. I don't support the Trump administration's immigration policies in any way. I think the result of these policies, which has meant that thousands of children were separated from their parents, are antithetical to the values of this country. I never thought I would witness such a thing, as we have seen over the last 3 or 4 months.
You lying! You lying! We don't take it out!
Okay, we're going to give that additional. Please add the time to Mr. Schiff.
I think those kind of policies that have resulted in the separation of children from their parents are immoral and unethical. It's also, sir, if I may, if I can complete my answer, I'd appreciate it. It's not true to what this country is about. This country has always taken in people who were fleeing violence, people who were seeking a better life. We are a nation of laws, and we should enforce those laws. As a prosecutor, I did enforce those laws. I prosecuted people who were coyotes or immigrant smugglers. But we are also a nation of compassion, and the immigration policies of this administration lack compassion. They vilify immigrants as murderers and rapists, people coming here to do harm to us, when it was immigrants that have helped build this country. And so I think this policy, which the president evidently believes is politically advantageous, to attack people who are fleeing violence, runs counter to what this country has always been about. So I favor a comprehensive immigration reform that protects dreamers and their families, that allows for an orderly immigration process, that has the United States play its historic role in being a refuge for people fleeing in seek of a better life. So I have strong disagreement with what I see from the Trump administration. To continue to witness the demagoguing of people coming to this country, I think just runs contrary to our proud history that we see embodied in that Statue of Liberty. So I support a comprehensive immigration reform, one that gives a path towards legal citizenship for people who are already here, one that strengthens our security, but does so in a humane way.
Thank you. Mr. Nalbandian, Mr. Nalbandian, your 1-minute response, please.
Congressman Schiff, here we go again. You know, your administration, looking at the Democrat Party, you want to open the doors. We got a problem out there. Our constituency out there is suffering. I have been visiting these homeless pockets, which all these illegals are taking. My parents came here in 1944. They ran away from the Bolsheviks, but they came here legally. Legally. Okay. And I am so tired of the hypocrisy coming from the Democrat Party. 1 minute they're for immigration. The next minute they're not for immigration. What is it? Let's get on a program. We all love America. I know you love America. And hey, I met you 10 years ago.
Thank you. Mr. Sherman, your 1-minute response, please.
I incorporate by reference Mr. Schiff's comments. I believe that we should be a welcoming country, a rule of law country. I think that in order to legalize the 12 million who are part of our society, that we're willing to agree to certain things that we might not agree to in freestanding legislation. including effective enforcement of our current immigration laws. As to Mr. Reed's comments, he's run against me 9 times. He's 5 primaries, 4 generals. He's never gotten 40% of the vote. It's got to be frustrating for him. But that's not an excuse to just make up a bunch of lies and hold up a giant sign accusing me of being a rapist. So I hope that the League of Voters will assure that this process goes forward on the issues. And I look forward to working with Mr. Schiff and others to have an immigration system that makes sense and that does not rip 12 million people out of our society.
Mr. Reed, your 1-minute response.
I didn't make up anything, Mr. Sherman. These are all comments that are coming out of news organizations. The situations took place in your office, and I didn't run 9 times. I've run 4 times against you, and yes, I have gotten 35 to 40% of the vote each time. It's very difficult to win an election against an incumbent. But the reality of immigration policies, the Democrats have had full control of the presidency, the Senate, and the House, and you haven't passed anything. Why? Because you do not want to pass anything. Just as many Democrats have constituents that want cheap labor, just as the Republicans have just as many constituents in the farm areas, the service areas, in the workforce. So it's really a political quagmire, both sides of the aisle, not having the political will to pass real immigration reform. And what we're watching right now is a massive human tragedy because Congress has failed over the last 3 decades of passing real immigration policies.
I'd like to remind the audience, this is a candidate forum, not a town hall. Please do not disrupt the forum. Thank you.
Free country.
Thank you. The next question will be directed first to Mr. Nalbandian. Scientists have warned that if current levels of fossil fuel consumption continue unchecked, the Earth could warm by as much as 7 degrees Fahrenheit by 2100, which could have a catastrophic impact on the planet. Others have argued that even though the stakes may be high, the costs required to make vehicles more fuel efficient are not economically feasible, and propose to freeze gas mileage standards for light trucks and cars produced after the 2020 model year. Do you agree or disagree? Why or why not? Your 3-minute response, please.
2 minutes?
3.
3 minutes. Well, first of all, I think you need to go after China and you need to go after India on this issue. Do I agree? I'm not going to sit here and say that climate change is a hoax, and I'm not going to say that it's right there. But from what I see from the Weather Channel and from what's going on, there's a lot of people getting very rich off of climate change. And they're making a big deal about it. And it's like the Democrat Party. They've always got an issue where they go into somebody's heart and squeeze it. And they've been destroying business with all of these issues, climate change, and then they chased all the boats out of here. I'm in the seafood industry all my life. They've chased boats out of here with the high fuel prices, with all the sustainability stuff, and the fishermen can't make it. They go down to Mexico, fish, and then they start selling it back to the U.S. There's something wrong with that picture. They go up to Canada and fish, then they start selling it back to the U.S. Now, when I hear the Weather Channel founder that is sitting and saying that climate change is a hoax, I am all for clean air. And I think right now with the systems we have in place, I think we're in the right direction, and I think the Trump administration is doing a great job.
Mr. Sherman, your 1-minute response, please.
Trump's withdrawal of the standards for fuel efficiency are bad for motorists. Better fuel efficiency saves us money.
Ow.
Please.
Can I have that time restored,
ahead.
please? Obviously, you pay less for gas if you buy less gas. Second, it's critical for our environment. Third, it's critical for our foreign policy because if you can reduce world consumption of oil, you take money away from some of the worst regimes in the world, starting with Iran. But Trump's policy is even worse as it affects the San Fernando Valley. We care about natural gas storage safety, and we had regulations adopted at the federal level at my personal request. I think you were there when I got the president to make a commitment. He adhered to that commitment. We had nationwide standards for natural gas storage safety. Trump withdrew those regulations, and it's time for every Republican in our area to stand up and say, Donald Trump, why have you withdrawn those regulations? You should be condemned for doing so.
Thank you. Mr.
Because you
Reed,
don't know what you're talking.
the audience is requested to contain themselves. Please. We'd like to get through this tonight. Mr. Reed, your 1 minute response, please.
Once again, the climate change issues is really to put a stranglehold on the throat of business and innovation, and it's a crock. I want to talk about what's happening in the district and my opponent's complete neglect of the district. He talks about the Aliso Canyon. That was all with the regulations, and under the current governor's sister was actually the CEO or the board of directors of Aliso Canyon, the gas company. It's because of the Democrats really just want money for their campaign, so they neglect their district. We're looking at a district right now that's overrun with homelessness, mental health care patients, drug addicts walking the streets. We have people being stabbed in the streets of the district because our representatives are failing to really represent the district and create the lifestyle of security that we deserve and that we work for. So all of these issues you're bringing up are great questions, but they're really just smoke and mirrors to them not doing the jobs that they're really supposed to be doing.
Thank you. Mr. Schiff, your 1 minute response, please.
I support fuel efficiency standards for vehicles, and I strongly oppose the Trump administration's efforts to take away California's opportunity to control how clean the air is that Californians breathe. The efforts by the administration to drill off our coast, and the president's unwillingness to accept the gravity of climate change, both the phenomenon itself as well as the human contribution to climate change. Those running under his banner apparently share his affinity for climate denial. But when we see the extraordinary incidences of extreme weather now and the impact it's having all over the country and all over the world, this is not something that we can deny. This is something that we have to address. We need an Apollo project-like effort to invest in renewable energy. We should be pulling out all the stops. This really is the global issue here. Nothing else that we talk about tonight is going to matter if the planet becomes uninhabitable. And that's where we're headed when people put profits over the planet. So I think we need to have a determined effort to address this issue.
Thank you.
Yeah, more homeless.
It's a hoax.
I'm going to ask the audience once again to refrain from disrupting and from applauding. You're taking time from this forum. Thank you. The next question will be directed first to Mr. Sherman. The recent tumultuous hearings in the Senate over the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court have given rise to several proposals that would alter the processes for nominating Supreme Court justices. Proposed changes include allowing each president 2 appointments, limiting the judicial terms to 18 years, and expanding the number of justices on the court. What changes to the Supreme Court, if any, would you propose and why? Mr. Sherman, your 3 minute response, please.
We've turned the Supreme Court into a political football. It shouldn't be. The worst was when the President Obama's appointment was stalled for a full year without even being given a hearing. The effect of that needs to be reversed. And it can only be reversed if there are 2 additional Democratic appointments to the Supreme Court, one to counterbalance Gorsuch and one to be the the vote that should have been appointed by President Obama. I could see therefore a small expansion of the court at an appropriate time, but never again should we have a situation where a president's nominees are stalled in an effort to prevent the president from exercising his or her responsibilities. I do want to take just a minute to go back to global warming and to say that this is a matter of science. But not since Galileo was hauled before the Inquisition have the enemies of science had such powerful friends. and it's time for us to listen to the scientists and to deal with global warming.
Yeah, how much money they have to make?
That's the
I
97%.
asked you to restore the time, but
Yes,
I think
please.
but I think I've spoken enough, so I yield back.
Okay, fine. Mr. Reed, your 1-minute response, please.
Going back to the CO2 emissions, we have less CO2 emissions based on the free marketplace than 1982. The government really just wants to control our free marketplace by over-regulations and strangleholding the businesses within America and tax the living tar out of them. It's pertaining to Kavanaugh's hearing. It was a tragedy on a multiple of levels of the advice and consent process of the Senate, bringing up sexual allegations and undermining the due process of innocent until proven guilty. Yes. It was a tragedy all the way around, pertaining to all the women in the United States. And when you look at the sexual harassment and rape allegations that have come out of my opponent's office, he shouldn't even be talking about this subject. He should be... He should be impeached all in itself, just for that as well. Yeah. The other process is he yanked out the questions out of a town hall meeting that he recorded about the sexual harassment and rape allegations. That is a what do you call it, a blocking of justice.
That's it. Thank you. Mr. Schiff, your 1-minute response, please.
About 10 years ago, I formed a bipartisan caucus on the judiciary to try to improve relations between the Congress and the courts. We sought to encourage the Senate to adopt a bipartisan rule that in the case of district court judges and court of appeals judges, that when someone was nominated, they would be entitled to a vote within 90 or 120 days, regardless of the party of the president or the party in power in Congress. We were not successful. The action by Mitch McConnell at the Supreme Court level to leave a vacancy for an entire year was about the worst abuse of the constitutional system in the courts that I've seen in my tenure in Congress. The failure to do an adequate investigation of credible allegations of sexual assault with respect to Judge Kavanaugh was another, I think, terrible precedent for the Supreme Court. It is deeply at risk of becoming yet another partisan institution which would ill-serve the public and tragically is a reflection of the politicization and the balkanization of our country. Somehow we're going to have to address that. I don't know that you can address it by changing the rules of appointment.
Thank you. Mr. Nalbandian, your 1-minute response, please.
You're saying my name beautifully.
Thank you so much.
We're not the ones who turned the Kavanaugh, the Supreme Court, into a football game. You guys have turned it into a circus.
Yep.
And I got to tell you something.
Yes.
If I were you two sitting here, I would really go back to your party and start acting like someone like a JFK or a Harry S. Truman. But all day, all we get is Trump derangement syndrome. And this has got to be stopped. We're all here. I'm not saying Congressman Schiff doesn't love this country, and I'm not saying you don't love this country. I know Mark does as well. But we've got to stop this if we want to move forward. Our community that I grew up in has problems. There's poop all over Hollywood Boulevard.
Yep. There is.
Enough is enough.
Yes.
Instead, we're sitting here and destroying a family like Kavanaugh and with no
Thank you.
proof
Thank you, Mr.
whatsoever.
Nalbandian.
Yes.
I would like to remind the audience that applause during your own candidate's remarks will not be given back to that candidate.
This
Only
is a
to-
public forum.
This is a League of Women Voters.
Yes.
This is not a town hall. This is not a town hall. The next question will be directed first to Mr. Reed. In 2013, the U.S. Supreme Court overturned the pre-clearance coverage formula of the Voting Rights Act in 2013, removing a critical tool to combat racial discrimination in voting. Since that ruling, several states previously covered under pre-clearance have moved to restrict voter rights by implementing restrictive voting measures such as strict photo ID requirements, early voting cutbacks, and registration restrictions. Do you support or oppose legislation that would restore key protections of the Voting Rights Act, and why? Mr. Reed, your 3-minute response, please.
The corruption in our voting systems right now, it goes way beyond the Voters' Rights Act. And it's an abomination at this point. I mean, they've proven it. The state of California, Alex Padilla refused to work with this administration, giving up the voter rolls and be able to analyze them and see how many people are dead, see how many people have moved out of the state, see what the integrity of our election process is. And there's been proof all through this country that our election system's integrity has been compromised by a multiple of things, not just suppression of voter rights. I have to give a driver's license to cash a check. I have to give a driver's license to get on an airplane. I just flew out to Wisconsin. What is the big problem of having a voter ID card? Any kind of a card to show who you are, or create an ability to enhance voter integrity of creating a national holiday on election day. So you have the full day to go there and cast your vote. The way the election systems now have to be completely revamped. I mean, even my opponent said at one time that this is the banana republic, because he admits there's a lot of voter fraud in the district, in this state, in this country. We need to address it. We need to address it fully in any which ways possible to bring back the integrity of our election systems, because right now there's just a mass amount of fraud in it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Schiff, your 1-minute response, please.
There's never been any evidence of massive fraud in the voting system, and indeed, when the president,
Good liar.
We are adding 15 seconds to Mr. Schiff's time.
Still a liar.
and indeed, when the president tried to find evidence of voter fraud and establish a
Bad liar.
commission designed to do so, he failed. The commission failed, and the reality is, the states that have pushed this, and Republican legislators in places like Pennsylvania, have been very upfront about their motivations and have said, politically, this will help us get elected by disenfranchising people. And the people that are being targeted by these laws are largely people of color, minority voting populations, and
Objective proof.
I'm not a victim.
Mr. Schiff,
and
Mr. Schiff is being
yes.
given another 15 seconds.
Still a liar. Another 15 seconds to lie. Stink eye. Wow.
Don't make me a victim.
I think these efforts to disenfranchise minority populations are antithetical to the traditions of this country. It would send us back in time when people of color, it would have set us back in time when people of color had difficulty in being able to access the franchise. We should be expanding the franchise by making Election Day a national holiday. We should make it easier for people to vote. Not use phony allegations of voter fraud to disenfranchise people. So yes, I support restoring protections for voting rights, and I think this cynical effort to do away with those protections is driven by political factors and nothing by evidence.
Thank you. Mr. Nalbandian, your 1-minute response, please.
Does it count my parents are from Russia? Anyway, disenfranchising the Republican, I mean, I'm not a big party guy, I want you to know that. I'm a constitutional conservative.
Yeah.
And you know something? This, going in with this Russian stuff, wasting $30 million, and I don't mean to be off subject, but it's kind of on subject. And disenfranchising, the Democrat Party's the one who disenfranchised, period. Am I wrong or am I right? And I hope we have a great election. And the other day, just to let you know, I campaigned at Forest Lawn to see how many votes I can get.
That's a line for the agents.
This forum is going to end at 8:45.
Okay.
If the audience disrupts the forum, we will not be able to answer all the questions. So please restrain from please restrain. Thank you. Mr. Sherman, your 1-minute response, please.
Unfortunately, my opponent kind of makes things up. He says that I claimed that there was massive voter fraud in America. That's ridiculous. As Mr. Schiff points out, that is not the case. And I may have said something about Banana Republic, but I was referring to a president that refuses to publish his tax returns. I was certainly not talking.
Let's see yours!
I'd like my time restored.
Where's your tax return? How much cash you steal?
We're adding 15 seconds to Mr. Sherman's time.
Certainly, any phrase that I ever used of Banana Republic did not imply that there was massive voter fraud. I'll tell you what is fraudulent, and that is the census question that they're trying to use to prevent immigrants from answering the census.
Liar.
The purpose
Liar.
of that is to cost California money, to undercount the number of people there are in California, to diminish California's power, and to override Supreme Court decisions that say that census and the allocation of electoral college votes and House districts is to be made on the basis of all persons resident,
Sanctuary
no matter
cities?
what.
Yeah, Sanctuary City,
All
huh?
persons resident, and in fact, that decision is over 100 years old.
Sanctuary states?
So we're going. Well, I represent all the people who live in my district. Those
No, you don't.
If anybody kills your family, would you say the same thing? You know people who killed? You look at me. I see the people who was killed because of Sanctuary City. If his family killed, would you do the same? Wow.
Where's your decorum, lady?
You don't get to yell.
Free country!
The next question.
I believe I still have more time.
That's right, you do have more time.
And I would hope that the League of Women Voters would do everything possible to provide order. And if you can't have order, then perhaps shorten, because
It will
this is
automatically be shortened.
You had your
going
back
back
screaming
to
in the Supreme Court.
going back to the questions. I represent all the constituents.
No, you don't.
Those,
You're a member of Supreme Court.
again, I'd like more time.
Just don't lie.
We're adding 15 more seconds to Mr. Sherman's time.
15 seconds of lies.
Yes. Pack of lies.
Please continue, sir.
I will try to continue. I'm being over-yelled by a lot
You're
of people in the audience.
citizens.
They can't hear you.
I represent everyone. I represent those who are under 18. I represent Jehovah's Witnesses who choose not to register to vote. I represent legal immigrants. I represent everyone who lives in my district.
Illegals?
Everyone should be counted.
Illegal
And when we turn to the federal government and say that those who are undocumented should
Illegal.
count,
Illegal
we
aliens.
Your
should
term is out.
first.
Enough.
Can I interject? Can I interject a second? Well, I'd like
No,
to say
you
to
cannot
everybody.
interject.
This is my time,
This is
Johnny.
Mr. Sherman, I'm sorry.
And
I'm sorry.
I would like a
This
full
is Mr.
minute of
Sherman's time.
uninterrupted, to
Yes.
respond to this question. And if it takes 5 or 10 minutes to give that to me, that's what I'd like.
Okay? Please can finish.
The law says that you allocate congressional districts based on all residents, whether they're here with documents or not. The Republicans don't dare change the law. They don't dare. They don't have the votes to change the Constitution. So they're trying to terrorize immigrants into not responding to the census. That will cost California billions of dollars. It will cost us congressional representation. It will cost us electoral college representation. And when people put their party above the state of California, that's a mistake. Every single California Republican should rise up and say, count everyone. That is what the Constitution calls for. And if you want to change the Constitution, fine. Propose an amendment that says that certain
Thank you.
people don't count. But if you can't do
Thank you.
that, don't try to defeat
Thank
the
you.
Constitution.
The next question will be directed first to Mr. Schiff. Some states have filed suit to have the Affordable Care Act's individual mandate declared unconstitutional, and by extension, the guarantee of affordable coverage of pre-existing health conditions. The Justice Department, which is in charge of defending existing federal legislation, has indicated that in this case they will not. Do you support or oppose the position of the Justice Department? Why or why not? Mr. Schiff, your 3-minute response, please.
I strongly support the Affordable Care Act and making improvements to the Affordable Care Act. You don't improve it by taking away protections from people with pre-existing conditions. You probably saw today the President tweeted that he fully supports healthcare for people with pre-existing conditions. That's nonsense. His own Justice Department refuses to defend the right of people to get healthcare who have a pre-existing condition. As one of my constituents said to me, I'm 65 years old, I am a pre-existing condition. If we go back to the way it was, a great many of my constituents, including some of the young people that just came to visit me with juvenile diabetes, will not be able to get health care. I am strongly opposed to the position that this President and Justice Department have taken. I don't think that depriving people of access to affordable care is where the country should head. We should make improvements to the existing law. Mitch McConnell says he wants to have another repeal vote. We've already had 50 repeal votes. They put nothing forward to replace it. They just want to get rid of it. They just want to say, if you can't afford health care, too darn bad. That's your problem. Don't ask anyone to do anything else about it. Well, I think we ought to insist that insurers cover you and not be able to drop you just because you get sick. The whole point of insurance, after all, is to have health care when you need it. So I strongly oppose what the Trump administration is doing.
Thank you. Mr. Nalbandian, your 1-minute response, please.
Here I go again. Another Marxist deal. Was that an Affordable Care Act? It's really Obamacare, the lie of the century. Am I right or am I wrong? Right. The lie of the century. Okay? You can keep your doctor. You can keep your doctor. And each family's going to save $2,500. Did they save $2,500? It went up 40% in the state of California. All businesses are going bananas over it. It went up 100% in Arizona and every state. You guys ruined the free market system. Open up the states. Let's create competition. There's nothing like the free market system. When I had my company, I had the greatest insurance until the government got involved.
Right.
Thank you. Mr. Sherman, your 1-minute response, please.
Republicans say that you can buy insurance with a pre-existing condition, but people won't be mandated to have insurance. That's like saying to the auto insurance companies that they have to sell you a policy after the accident. It doesn't work. For insurance to work, people have to buy insurance, and that will include both those with pre-existing conditions and those without. This attempt to allow Californians, California to allow the sale of junk insurance policies. Most of us have insurance through our employer, or wife's employer in my case. And you think you're going to get pretty good insurance because California regulates that. But the proposal we have is that if you can find somewhere in Winkie, Wyoming, some entity that will let you sell terrible insurance, then you can provide that to your California employees, and
Thank you.
California can't do anything about it.
Thank you. Mr. Reed, your 1-minute response, please.
Going back to the comments pertaining to voter suppression and the census question that was placed on there, the information that was gathered in the census wasn't going to be shared with any other department within the federal government for 60 years. The terrorizing of individuals filling out that census was created by the Democrats in order to control all ethnic groups. Right. So this terrorization came from the Democrats, not from the Republicans. The census question has been on there before. As pertaining to the Affordable Care Act, how affordable is health care now? You have to spend $6,000 on premiums, then you have to have $6,000 deductibles. It's $12,000 a year. I'm 60 years old. I've taken care of myself. I don't see the doctor very often unless I do really something stupid. And then I have to go see the doctor, and I pay for it myself. So when I look at the insurance companies getting full throttle with the creation of the ACA, destroying our abilities to have good medical health care or pay for our own medical health care when we want to see a doctor, the Democrats really messed it up.
Thank you. The next question will be directed to what? I think, no, the next question will be directed first to Mr. Nalbandian. As we approach the midterm elections, election security is a concern of voters and can impact voter turnout. Vulnerabilities in our election systems include election office networks and practices, as well as cyber threats and attacks to voter registration databases and voting infrastructure by insiders or foreign actors. What should Congress be doing to assist state and local authorities responsible for election security. How would you prioritize resources and action to address these concerns? Mr. Nalbandian, your 3-minute response, please.
You know, you're talking about foreign actors. It's unbelievable. You don't want us to go give ID. You were speaking from both sides of our mouth, Democrats. On one side, you want not to show ID, and this racist rhetoric is getting old.
Yeah.
Give me proof that Donald J. Trump or Mike Pence are racist. I would love to see that. And when you say about ID, wherever I go, I got to show ID. So I'm going to go and vote and not show ID. And then you're talking about foreign actors. So on one side, you want to bring in foreign actors. Let's go to the wall for just a second. You know, and that has to do with voting. I'm going to say something here, and I hope these gentlemen back me up. If these illegals didn't vote Democrat down the line, Chuck, Nancy, Congressman Schiff, Congressman Sherman, we wouldn't need contractors. They'd be down there building that wall. And how am I I'm going to ask the President of the United States, because I feel I was cheated during the primaries, okay? And I'm going to ask the President of the United States to send in federal marshals for our election, because California has a problem.
Yes!
15
seconds.
I'm done.
Okay. Mr. Sherman, your 1-minute response, please.
Proof that Trump is a racist when he declares that immigrants coming to our country from Mexico are in 3 categories. The big categories, rapists and murderers, and then he says, and also in a third smaller category.
If this is going to be,
Give Mr. Sherman an additional 15 seconds, please.
15 more lies.
And in a third and smallest category, he puts good people. When he says that there are good folks on both sides in Charlottesville, that there's good people marching with the Nazis and the Klan, I think we have a president who's racist.
who started the Ku Klux Klan?
I fight for you, God damn it.
Democrats.
I am Jewish, God damn it. Liars.
Give
I
Mr.
fight for you.
Give Mr. Sherman an additional 15 seconds, please.
I am Jewish like you.
We are not here to listen to you. We are here.
I'll begin when the room is quiet.
Would you keep your mouth
You
shut?
listen, you're liars, and I appreciate what you just
You know,
said.
you're doing the same thing he did.
They
so
did
you know
much
better.
more in the Congress. What did you do in the Congress? What did you do in Congress? Antifa!
It's our First Amendment.
We're not going to get to hear what they have to
There's
say.
no stability when they lie. What are we supposed to do?
You're making a judgment about what they're saying, but you're not allowing the
Sherman, would you
information.
like to continue, please?
One gentleman from the crowd shouts that it's okay for Trump to be a racist because in the 1880s there were Democrats who were racist. I don't think that.
Look at this nation. Look at this. I am Jewish. I am Jewish. I am Jewish from Soviet. You liars. I fight for you. I teach them. I was teaching them fighting for you. You're taking your fair time away from you. Don't touch him. Don't touch him. Don't touch him.
Don't touch him.
Shame on you. My heritage, I will see you. I lived through 33 years of hell.
Come on, let's just get through it. Give them fair time.
Mr.
Fair time for
Sherman, would you
lies?
like to complete your statement, please?
Very much so. And Trump is waging a war against California.
No, he's
It's
not.
time for all Californians to stand up and say we deserve an honest count of all the people that are here in our state.
Except illegal aliens.
Instead, there are Californians working for a system which will take money and power away from California and send the money to North Dakota and South Dakota and other states with low immigrant populations. I look forward to working with California Republicans and Democrats to stand up for our state.
Thank you. Mr. Reed, your 1-minute response, please.
as an American Indian, Hispanic, and my wife being Hispanic, it really upsets me when the race card is constantly pulled from one side of the aisle. There's nothing on Donald Trump that says he's a racist, except for the Democrats calling him a racist. As pertaining to voter suppression, let me finish. I like the applause, but let me finish.
15 more seconds.
That's all right. As pertaining to voter suppression, when a sitting congressman is given the opportunity to have a debate / town hall meeting from a synagogue, from churches, from American Legion halls, from battered women, from the Ventura County Medical Association, from the North Valley Health Center for autistic children and children with special needs, and he turns every single one of them down so his constituents that he says he represents all of them can't hear his voice and hold him accountable. And then he's got the audacity to say rape and sexual harassment charges coming out of his office. That's the pot calling the kettle black, and it's the most disgusting conversation that he's having today.
Mr. Schiff, your 1-minute response, please.
1 minute lie.
Ronald Reagan once said that he didn't leave the Democratic Party left him. When I watched Donald Trump in Helsinki take the side of Vladimir Putin over his own intelligence agencies, it was clear that the Republican Party had left Ronald Reagan. I look forward to the day when the Republican Party once again identifies with Ronald Reagan and people of stature like John McCain. Not the deeply immoral person we have in the Oval Office right now. This is probably about the dozenth time I've appeared at a League of Women Voters debate, and I appreciate your efforts to keep the debate civil tonight. It is a sign of what's going on in the country, and I think the divisive brand of politics by Mr. Trump, that we've had so many disruptions this evening, we've had such a lack of civility. This is, I think, the product of a president who doesn't understand that a core part of the responsibility of the president is to make us a more perfect union. And instead we have someone who gets up every morning, I think, more determined than ever to divide us. What we ought to have is a whole of government. What we ought to have.
Mr. Schiff will be given additional 15 seconds.
What we ought to have is a whole of government approach to protect our elections against any foreign interference. We've just seen yet another indictment of yet another Russian for yet additional interference in our democratic affairs. And the fact that the party of Reagan doesn't care about Russian intervention in our affairs is a tragic sign of the change in direction of that party.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question will be directed first to Mr. Sherman.
Democrats sending bombs to themselves.
Current proposals to strengthen Homeland Security include increasing the number of border agents, constructing physical and electronic barriers, developing more effective anti-hacking tools, increasing electronic surveillance, and tightening or restricting the issuance of visas. Given budgetary limitations, in what areas should we devote the greatest amount of resources? Mr. Sherman, your 3-minute response, please.
We need comprehensive immigration reform. I think Adam and I have supported it continuously for over a decade. That has got to start with turning to 12 million people who are fabric of our society and providing them with a road to citizenship. It also has to include effective enforcement. You mentioned some things. We Democrats have voted to provide barriers at the border where they're called for. The idea of a wall the entire length of the border has now been abandoned even by Donald Trump. We Democrats have voted for more border agents, and we Democrats have agreed to E-Verify as part of a comprehensive immigration plan. So we need a system that turns to people who live here and are part of our society and takes the tremendous burden off them. Waking up every morning, imagine what it is to sit down with your kids, who I might add are American citizens, and say, here's what happens if dad and mom are pulled out of the country. Here's where you go.
Oh, come on.
Here's our plan for that disaster. Going back to the related question on the census, it is indeed an attempt to terrorize immigrants. keep in mind, the census question was used to round up Japanese Americans in a black period of our time.
By a
our
Democrat.
By a Democrat. Thank you.
Mr. Sherman will be given 15 seconds in addition.
15 lies.
History. And so there is certainly no assurance to immigrants who live in our society now that the census information will not be used or the law will not be changed to allow it to be used for deportation. Finally, my erstwhile opponent says I don't accept debate invitations. I accept the League of Women Voters invitation. That's why I'm here. 2 years ago, I accepted the opportunity to debate in this room, this very forum, with its excellent broadcast facilities that allow people to see quality broadcasts anytime they want. Not a way to reach a few hundred people, but a way to reach thousands of people with a quality broadcast. And he refused. So for him to come to the League of Women Voters forum, which he consistently degrades, barely shows up at this time, and then attacks me for not debating him in Camarillo. My district includes the San Fernando Valley, and I get attacked on social media for not meeting him in Camarillo. This debate is here and now. We should have one debate each and every general election. We would have had one in 2016. I was ready to sit in this chair, but you wouldn't let me sit in this chair because he refused to sit in that chair. So I look forward to an appropriate number of debates. That is to say, I believe one here and now, and broadcast in quality, available to the entire district.
Thank you. Mr. Reed, your 1 minute response, please.
Again, complete voter suppression. The League of Women Voters LA chapter was the one who invited him to the 5 debates with the battered women's organization, with a synagogue, 2 churches, and the American Legion. And he turned down them all flat with the League of Women Voters. And I specifically understood Congressman Sherman's, how would you say, qualifying conditions that it had to be the League of Women's Voters moderating. I didn't have a problem with it. I've never had a problem with it. I think it's a fantastic organization. I've never berated the League of Women's Voters. You've berated women in general just by the way you run your office. I don't give him more time, restored my time like he's been given himself.
I believe your own supporters were the ones.
They're not my supporters. I didn't invite them. They're the supporters of America. They're American supporters.
We don't restore the time if your supporters are the ones that disrupt.
And I do think that was a personal attack for which I should be allowed to respond.
You're personally attacking me, but I'm personally responding with facts where you're not responding with facts. You're making stuff up as you go along.
Thank you. Mr. Schiff, your 1 minute response, please.
I think our priority ought to be to make sure that the kids that are still separated from the parents are immediately reunited with their parents. That's the most urgent immigration priority in my view. And second, I think we need to give some solidity to these dreamers who wonder whether they have a future in this country, who've grown up here, who have never known any other country but this one. I think that also is an urgent priority. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we need comprehensive immigration reform. Our immigration system is broken. It does need to be fixed. It ought to be orderly. It ought to be humane. And you can't do that in a piecemeal fashion. So those are the priorities that I would attach to that. Security is certainly one element of it, but it ought to be a comprehensive solution that doesn't ignore the millions of people that are living here, that are paying their taxes, that are devoted to this country, want to become full members of this country and citizens of this country, and we should give them a pathway to citizenship.
Thank you. Mr. Nalbandian, your 1
My
minute
children are
response,
dreamers
please.
as well, Adam.
That's right. Well said.
Jeff, I'm a dreamer.
Democrat Party, let's talk to Kate Stanley's parents. Let's talk to Jamil Shaw's parents. And these are Californians. They're dreamers. They're not dreaming anymore. They're not going to see their parents anymore. That's number one. Number two, How dare you folks go up in Oakland and warn MS-13 gangs that ICE is coming? How dare you? And by the way, I'm a historian.
Traitors.
You hated President Bush. You hated Ronald Reagan. You hated McCain. You hated Romney and all of these people. So don't tell me if Jesus Christ came down and put an R next to his name, he would be a misogynist, he'd be a rapist, and he'd be a racist. Enough is enough. Let's talk about our communities. I didn't come here. I didn't come here for a Trump bashing.
Thank you, Mr. Nalbandian.
Excuse me. I didn't come here. Excuse me. I didn't come here for a Trump bashing session. I came here to help the families of my community.
The next question will be directed first to Mr. Reed. In 2017, the mass shooting in Las Vegas killed 58 people and injured another 546. With mass shootings becoming a regular occurrence, how would you address the problem of gun violence in our communities, places of work and worship, and schools? Mr. Reed, your 3-minute response, please.
Get rid of Democrats.
I'm a strong Second Amendment supporter, number one. That's a God-given right, and not a right given to me by my Constitution or the federal government. It's my God-given right. However, but that being said, I have a very eloquent video on my website about my Second Amendment stances and the positions. The Democrats have failed to really address the primary issue, and that's keeping guns out of mentally disturbed individuals. Systemic problems of people who have lost their Second Amendment rights still can go in and buy guns. The one in Texas, was a guy who was kicked out of the military, dishonorable discharge. He also was proven guilty for beating up his wife, and then went back to Texas, beat up his girlfriend. Those are all Second Amendments. There's systemic issues that are failing in our country of keeping guns out of people's hands. I also believe that legislation should be passed just like driving a car. You get a driver's license. You should have to go through an NRA class when you buy a new gun, when you buy any gun, and be well trained for it and know it. There's safety measures. But to come across with a bill like Congressman Sherman has proposed to ban assault weapons, look, criminals don't follow the law. They could care less about the law. They're going to get a gun and they're going to shoot people. Yep. So how do we keep guns out of the people who have mental issues or have lost their Second Amendment rights through due process? This is what needs to be addressed. The Democrats keep using this as a, how would you say, a scare tactic. We need to get the guns out of the hands of everybody. And the reality of it is there's 350 million guns that are registered. There's probably another 300 million guns that are unregistered in the United States of America. You're not going to stop this problem by taking guns away. You're going to stop the problem by law enforcement. You're going to stop the problem by prosecuting individuals who commit crimes with guns. Jerry Brown, a famous Democrat, the one that my opponent, hugs up close against, took away the penalty assessment. Not a penalty assessment, the penalty enhancement in sentencing for criminals who commit a crime with a gun. That's the complete opposite. If somebody commits a crime with a gun, put them in jail, keep them there. Exactly. That's all there is to it.
Thank you.
Said I had one more minute.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were done.
No, I'm not done. This is a very, very touchy subject because the reality of it is it's really about law enforcement and getting serious about keeping guns out of irresponsible people's hands and prosecuting the systemic failures and the individuals who fail at the state level, the county level, and the federal level of allowing these things to continue going on. But to raise the big red flag, we got to take everybody's gun away because some insane idiot went out and shot a bunch of people is ridiculous, completely ridiculous. There's a lot of very responsible gun owners out there, like myself, who have guns in a gun safe. I go to the range and practice all the time, and to sit there and limit my ability to protect myself is ludicrous.
Thank you. Mr. Schiff, your 1-minute response, please.
Well, I'd like to address the comments about hatred here tonight. It seems appropriate circumstances given what we've been hearing this evening on the podium and from the audience. I didn't hate George W. Bush. He signed one of the most important pieces of legislation that I introduced to expand the Santa Monica Mountains Recreation Area. Governor Pete Wilson signed a great many of my bills into law. I differed with them on policy, but I didn't hate them. I never consider them a threat to our democracy, our institutions, or our rule of law. I do think this president is a threat to the rule of law. I think his
That's right, give him 15 seconds for it.
I think his attacks on the independence of the Justice Department, his attacks on our free press, his calling the press the enemy of the people,
Fake news.
all of this is destructive to our democratic institutions. All of it is destructive to the rule of law. And yes, I consider that a grave danger to the Republic. And I think that the Congress that has been unwilling to stand up to him, and it's clear my two colleagues here on the podium would be utterly unwilling to stand up to him, are complicit in those attacks on our institutions.
Thank you. Mr. Nalbandian, your 1-minute response, please.
What are you resisting? It's amazing. You would be against the press too if they reported 94% negative against you, Congressman Schiff. 94%. And by the way, that number I didn't pull out of the sky. That comes from a very liberal school, being Harvard. I mean, every day this guy gets up and boom, boom, boom. So you're resisting 3.7, I know Obama did it, 3.7 unemployment. You're resisting the lowest African American employment rate of anybody, any president, for any long time, unemployment. You're resisting 4.2 GDP. Yeah. I guess if he's crazy, we love it as a businessman. You guys talk that you care about the small business, but you know what? Action speaks louder than words. Right now, small businesses excited to be out there, except for in California. And by the way, have you read the balance sheet of California?
Thank you, Mr. Sherman.
2.3 trillion.
Mr. Sherman.
Upside down.
Thank you, Mr.
A balance sheet. If the Democrat Party knows how to read a balance sheet.
Mr. Sherman, your 1-minute response.
I want to associate myself with Mr. Schiff's comments about child separation, the Dreamers, comprehensive immigration reform, and Donald Trump. As to our economy, since we restored the fiscal system of this country by passing Dodd-Frank, we have created 17 million new jobs. 15 million under Obama, 2 million under Trump. Now,
Bonnie Frank did nothing.
I'll ask for more time.
Girl, Bonnie loose lips.
15 seconds, Mr.
You've been getting more time all night.
And you still lie.
BS doesn't work here.
Go ahead, give him more time.
You could have a lot more time if you showed up to one of my debates.
I fear the level of decorum that you would inspire, Mr. Reed, would not do credit to our country. As to gun control, we've got to get rid of bump stocks. We got to close the gun show loophole. That is something we've had Republicans tell us they don't want people who shouldn't have guns to be able to get guns, and then they support gun shows where you can buy a gun with no questions asked.
Liar.
That's how,
Liar.
in many, many states. That's why Burford Furrow was able to buy guns at a gun show in spite of his criminal convictions and come down into my district and shoot people in the mass shooting that occurred in the North San Fernando Valley roughly 20 years ago. We ought to limit the size. We ought to limit the size of the clip, because if you can't bring down a deer in 10 shots, get out of the forest.
Thank you,
And
Mr.
my good friend Ed Adams.
Thank you.
Time is up,
Thank
buddy.
The candidates will now have 2 minutes each for their closing statements. Mr. Schiff, your closing statement, please.
Once again, I want to thank the League. This has certainly been the most challenging debate I think that any League chapter has had to preside over. But I'm grateful. I'm grateful to the League. I'm grateful to.
Please let him finish. Please let him. This is closing statements.
I'm grateful to the League for bringing us out and having a chance to at least hear some of our views this evening on the issue of guns, which I didn't have a chance to address. I strongly support universal background checks. It makes little sense that you can go into a store if you have a felony record or you're mentally ill and be turned down because they do a background check and go out into the parking lot of that same store and buy that same gun from somebody selling out of the back of their truck, or go online and buy the same weapon. That makes no sense whatsoever. It's why not only a majority of Americans, but a majority of even NRA members support universal background checks. And I wish that we didn't have so many young people out there championing this because they've been the victims of terrible gun violence. But this country has a moral obligation to do something about it. I also favor a ban on assault weapons and high-capacity ammunition clips. In terms of what I'd like to do over the next couple of years, I want to continue the work I've done to help us prepare for an earthquake with an early earthquake warning system, expand our parks and open space with my legislation to double the size of the Santa Monica Mountains Recreation Area, expand access to mass transit like the Gold Line Light Rail, deal with quality of life issues like helicopter noise and aircraft noise, but also work on the key national interests of this country. As the ranking member on the Intelligence Committee, I dedicate most of my day to making sure the country is protected. I also want to make sure that the Congress of the United States is once again restored as a co-equal branch of government that does its necessary oversight, that can ferret out malfeasance and corruption in the government and in the administration. Under this Republican Congress, we have done no oversight whatsoever, and I think a president with the kind of autocratic tendencies as this one needs a rigorous Congress as a check.
Mr. Nalbandian, your 2-minute closing statement, please.
I didn't come here for a Trump bashing situation here. And, you know, it's getting old. $30 million of your money out there, it's getting damn old. Now, you talk about gun violence. You gave arms to the Syrian rebels that killed a lot of my people out in Syria and developed ISIS.
Why'd you do that?
I mean, we're talking about guns. Now, we talk about the NRA. Well, you know, more people are killed from cars each year. Why don't we close down the AAA club? Enough is enough. This all is out of the Marxist manifesto. And this is where I see, and it's sad to see, that this party, I could vote for a JFK, I could vote for a Harry S. Truman, but these people, when they're out there saying that ICE is on its way, get out of here, what do you think Kate Stanley, and these are Californians, what do you think their parents are thinking? The reason why I didn't go in politics in my 20s, my dad lost my sister to multiple sclerosis. And I had to quit politics, I had to quit baseball, and the whole bit. I can imagine. And it killed my father. He almost jumped in the grave with my sister. And I'm going to say this. How dare you stick up for the illegals? Illegal, not undocumented. One more time, illegal. And I'm going to fight with everything I got. And most of our homeless out there, 6 blocks from your office, Congressman Schiff, 6 blocks where you have graffiti on your office, okay? They're veterans. And by the way, you say you're a champion of my diaspora. And a couple of them are Armenians, happen to be American Armenians, that I had to lift off of the floor. So enough of this stuff. Thank you very much, ladies. I appreciate you having me.
Mr. Sherman, your closing statement, please.
I think we believe in automobile safety. We should also believe in gun safety. As I was explaining, our colleague Gabby Giffords, wounded, almost killed. The only reason she wasn't killed is that the assailant had to reload. When you allow unlimited size of the clips, you allow the next incident like that to lead to death.
Oh, come on.
And when Burford Furrow came into the North Valley in one of the only mass shootings in my district, he came to kill Jews, and then he went out and shot a Filipino-American postal worker just because he was wearing the uniform of the post office. My colleague will have a few minutes. He'll just make some things up. I will not be able to respond. If it's personal, I hope I am given a chance to respond. He makes up the idea that I said this country has massive voter fraud. That, of course, is not true. He's gotten 30 to 35% of the vote every
All you
time
gotta
he's
do
run
is
against
Google
me.
it.
And
Not this time.
I'd like
You
the
should
time restored.
campaign at Forest Lawn.
Okay.
Again, I'd like the time
Please
restored.
Please give Mr. Sherman an additional 15 seconds.
15 more lies.
And
Veterans on
I
the
know-
street,
I
you're
can
housing
understand-
illegals.
I can understand getting frustrated when you never get more than
I'm
about
a 100% service-connected veteran.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you for your service.
Please give Mr. Sherman an additional 15 seconds.
That's 30.
And I think we can see from what he's done to this forum why I'm not anxious to respond to last-minute emails from organizations that I haven't heard of demanding that I show up at a particular time that he selected by looking at my public schedule to pick a time when I can't be there. One debate is the appropriate number. We had 0 2 years ago because he refused to come to this room. Now, I look forward to going back to Congress to working on comprehensive immigration reform and airport
Amnesty.
noise. I look forward
No amnesty.
to taking actions to make sure we do not have a nuclear cooperation agreement with Saudi Arabia that puts them on the road to a nuclear bomb. I look forward to talking to you about that legislation.
Obama did it.
And I look forward to introducing legislation to regulate the price of pharmaceuticals, because we should not have drug companies simply charging people and saying pay or die.
Less regulation.
I want to thank the League of Women Voters for putting on this conference. I do not think
Thank you.
that that anything approaching a civil conference could
Thank
occur anywhere except this
Thank you,
room
Mr. Sherman.
with you. Thank you.
Mr. Reed, your 2-minute closing statement, please.
I want to thank the League of Women Voters for putting on this debate. It's always appreciated. I've had extensive conversations with both you, Joan, and Rita, and also with Fran in regards to setting up the 5 debates with Congressman Sherman, my opponent, of which he denied every single one of them. The one that he's talking about now is this next Sunday. It is at a Hispanic church. He does not want to show up because the Hispanics are finally realizing that the Democrats have shut down immigration, have shut down any possibility for improving the immigration policy. This is all under their watch. Adam, I asked Kevin Modesti my response, and I think it's a little unfair that you think that I would support somebody just blindly. That was probably one of the most moderate responses of the survey to Donald Trump and his presidency. My attitude towards what takes place in Congress, in the Senate, in the White House, I look at policies only. What are the best policies for America? And that's what I vote on. Right now, Congress has failed dismally in immigration, both sides of the aisle, both sides of the aisle. But this continual resistance, and racist comments coming out of your side of the party is really, it's got to stop. The hatred's got to stop. I agree with you on that. The other thing about gun control, anybody who doesn't know the difference between a clip and a magazine should not be telling me what to do with my guns. It's pertaining to making things up. I haven't made up one thing. You can Google all the stuff I've said. I believe in decorum in debates. I don't think that the limit should be one debate. I think as long as the community is requesting, the community, not me, the community is requesting these debates, they should take place, and it's incumbent upon him to be answerable to his district, not to his major donors in Washington, D.C. That's it. Again, visit my website at markreedforcongress.com, and you'll see all of my positions.
Love you, Mark.
Thank you. That concludes our candidate forum.